Brookings Radio, good day. We are joined in studio right now by Dr. Summer Schultz, the Superintendent of Schools here in the Brookings School District. Good day, and thank you for visiting with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we had a long meeting last night, and one of the reasons it was long is you gave a very informative talk about the governor's budget address from last week. For those who haven't heard, the governor is proposing 0% increase, not just for K-12 education, but for the so-called Big Three. That'd be the healthcare providers and the state employees as well. The governor is suggesting that some of this has to do with lower enrollment in schools, and maybe that's not necessarily the issue. Those are two separate things. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Sure, absolutely. One of the areas I did want to make sure that I educated our board and anyone who is advocating that piece that enrollment is down in South Dakota, that is accurate. I believe a 1.65% decrease in the number of students. However, birth rates are down in the state, have been decreasing some, and there are many more options for alternative education should families choose that. And so I'm just not sure why that is what we keep going back to. When we talk enrollment decrease, that simply means the state, for their part of the funding, has less students to fund. So the $15 million that the governor points out as a decrease due to the less funding given is simply because they're projecting fewer students in South Dakota. That is completely separate from the amount of money that the state by law is to give schools in the form of state aid. And so although the two get intertwined often, they are two different sections of how the budget would be determined.
So state government would be already saving some money in their budget due to lower enrollment.
Correctly. The $15 million that is in the governor's address as a decrease in the budget for the upcoming fiscal year is simply a number that comes from the 1.56% decrease in students across the state. It is not tied to any sort of funding formula. It's just on the number of students they're projecting. In the same sense, the lower students this year were part of why the education fund had surplus, which was then put into the general fund. Less students means the state has less funding requirements for those students.
But that is a separate issue from the, right now it's proposed at 0, but I think last year it was like 1.25%. That is, correct me if I'm wrong here, that's meant to keep up with the CPI, the inflation, those sorts of cost of living increases.
Correct. And so under South Dakota codified law, the general education state aid formula, it is built around what they call an index factor. And so that index factor is what is used as a per pupil, amount, or the index factor is determined by the lesser of two things. The CPI, which with the government shutdown, the latest CPI was September, but that is 2.9% right now. So CPI or 3%. Wouldn't matter if it was 2.9 or 3, about the same. That by law is what should be in that budget proposal if the law was being followed, if that codified law, and I believe it's 13.10.1, says how the school state aid should be funded. So when he compares what is in there with the enrollment, that's, I think, where it's a little bit frustrating. The two are not, they're just not the same.
That's apples and oranges.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you also mentioned there is room in the budget. He is proposing an increase in the state reserves, the savings account for the state.
Yeah.
And
yes.
It left, is it $14 million unaccounted for?
Yeah.
Or unspent, I should say.
Unspent, yes. And one of the things I said at the meeting also is I've had meetings with Governor Roden, with his chief of staff. They are always very respectful towards K-12 public education and education in general. So I do like to believe that, as we talked about earlier, this is a starting point. And so one of the things I wanted to address last night with the board was, if we're going to advocate, let's advocate in the areas that we know there is funding already just not identified as where it's going. Because I really don't want to get into any of those conversations where people who are, they're struggling. They're looking at, financially across the state where we know it's not necessarily all rosy right now. So if we're going to advocate, there are areas that already money is there. I'd like us to, advocate in those areas. And the first one is, historically, the state keeps a 10% reserve fund. Just that rainy day fund, they used to always call it. And Governor Roden, in his proposal, has asked for that to go up to a 12.5% reserve fund. That is approximately $70 to $79 million just right there that could be then allocated across the state. And of course, as someone who represents K-12 funding, I would love it if some of that funding could come in the form of, the state aid that we were hoping for just through law. And $14 million is what's needed for a 1% funding increase to state aid in K-12. And so this increase proposal for the state is 70 to 79 million. So there again, as we advocate, we just want to maybe grab onto some of those dollars that just aren't accounted for yet.
So it's a tight budget, but there is some wiggle room out there without hurting any other existing programs.
Exactly. And even you had said 14 million, again, that same amount, that's 1%. Governor Roden said that's just left over from the last budget cycle, and he's going to allow the legislators to decide where that goes. Now, there's plenty of other, areas in our state that are going to be buying for some of that too. And so I think we all respect each other and know that if one of us gets something, the other doesn't. We might use that in a conversation, but we're happy, when it comes to the Board of Regents or cities, counties, that sort of thing. We all need each other, but yet we have to advocate, those of us in those leadership positions.
Yeah, and this is very premature. We don't really want to talk about budget cuts and such, but now is the time to start planning and being proactive so that we don't have those very uncomfortable conversations this time next year.
Correct. And the way I do budget, and now that I'm, have had 2 full years under my belt, and we've managed to, get into where I am able to look and understand, how the budget was made. Those first years, anyone in a position new is just trying to understand some of the historical background, and of course, ESSER going away, one of my first year. Those were hard things across the state, but January is when the real tough budget conversations start for me in my schools. And so we do have to look at that piece, that if there is no new revenue coming in order to continue to pay our employees at the level of accountability that our state suggests and that, law says needs to happen, and to keep the programming of those things that we know are important, we might have to look at shifting some of our resources or people around and potentially look at staff reductions. I think that's in every organization when they start that real hard budget look, especially at a year where there just isn't an increase.
Yeah, it's tight all over, as you mentioned.
It is.
State legislators will have the final say. I think the session starts January 13th. So we'll
right
all be
around
watching
the corner.
closely.
Yes.
Yes, that is. That's less than a month away.
Yes.
Moving on to a happier topic. You mentioned a little bit at the meeting the other night about the science room renovations at the high school. How are we coming on planning for that?
Yeah, we're just in those last stages of finalizing the design and construction planning for that area. And when we say the science area, we struggle to find a better word for it, but it's really that encompasses more. It encompasses the bathrooms in that area, the roofs, the plumbing, some of the air handling system units in that little area. And so that has been identified really since I came to Brookings as a need at the high school. And all of our perception data from students and staff has said, you're right on there. And so we continue to work to finalize that. What we're not going to do is go out for any sort of bid until we've made sure we've asked the questions of what would be next and what types of activities, what types of renovations, what types of programming are we wanting to make sure that that building supports. And so just ensuring that our full facility plan, we are one of the deliverables from my ad team and our work with some outside consultant is that final facility plan. You know, we shouldn't be making decisions on facilities without that plan that really guides the age of equipment, the life expectancy of equipment, that sort of thing. We're fortunate that most of our buildings are newer, but we also have to make sure that we're aligning soon-to-be expenses at those buildings, along with the things we want to make sure we are changing and redoing at the high school. So that full plan is in development, but we want some stakeholder feedback. So we're really excited about what we see the design turning into in that science area, but we are also asking the questions here in the next month of what else? What are those next priority needs at the high school that people are really wanting to look at and get an appetite for if there are alternative funding suggestions? If, you know, it's hard to just, I don't want to give an opinion on what I think people would want us to do as far as project size, small, large. And so we're going to really spend some time asking those questions.
Okay. So will there be some community surveys coming out on that?
Yes. Yeah.
then?
We're just finalizing one that kind of pulls together the work that the priority areas that we are already considering based on some feedback, based on, there was some facility analysis work done 5, 6, 7 years ago it was rolled out, and some of those things are still very pertinent to the high school. And so I want to make sure that we're asking and we're getting to those priority areas, but then making sure that we're listening to what else is there and what are those priorities our community wants to see. That high school building is always just such a, it's one of those facilities in a district that they come to more often, that our students tend to congregate after school, that sort of thing. So we want to make sure it represents what our community and our stakeholders want.
Absolutely. Moving on to another topic, set an election date. We chose June for the next election. Can you tell us a little bit about if folks are interested in running for one of those two offices? I think it's a 3-year and a 1-year seat.
Yes.
When are nomination petition packets available?
Stacy will be, Stacy Van Beek is our election officer at the school district. And with the change in law, we will be posting those open positions here coming up at the end of December. So all the information for that will need to be advertised 2 times here towards the end of the month. And so she'll have specifics on that, and then we'll also have it on our website. There will be a 1-year position to fill the 1-year term that Kelly has vacated with her move into Nebraska. And then there will be an open 3-year position. Wes Cheddar's position on the board is coming up for, he will have, his term will be over. And so that position will be open as well.
Okay, so end of the month, beginning of next month?
Yes.
All right, we'll be looking forward to that.
Yes.
When Kelly resigned, there were, 8 people?
Yes.
That's fantastic that there's so much interest.
Yeah, yes. And, we did have those in executive session. It's always hard to know how much to make public or not, but I know that just in visiting with the board that there was such promising excitement and promising support and respect for the work being done. And so it's great when people take an interest in the school district.
So we're certainly hoping we'll have some candidates.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's always fun to have not uncontested seats out there to have a race.
Exactly.
All right. Moving on to another topic, we have the end of the first semester in about a week from Friday, I think. I'd like to ask, where are we at roughly one semester into the cell phone ban at the high school? How are things going there?
Well, I almost hate to answer just without having the people who have really put in the time and the work to pull it off not here with me. But I have said a couple times this year, I could not be more proud of our students and our families, because I expected it to not go as smoothly as it did. No matter how much support people have in districts and communities, something like having the cell phone be in a pouch during the instructional day is usually still met with some resistance. And I'm not saying we didn't have resistance of some sort and that the kids were excited about this, but what I saw was such a shift in how our teachers and our staff were able to have relationships with kids that weren't involved trying to get them away from those phones. And because we know what the neuroscience tells us, those kids they're so attached to them. And this has allowed them, we don't talk about cell phones much anymore because they're just not allowed during the instructional time. And so is it probably going perfect all the time? I imagine not. But have our staff been able to get back to teaching? Yes. And have our students, for the most part, said, I don't really like this, but I'm going to do it. I know it's good for me. And I could not be prouder. I could not be more proud of them.
That sounds like a win right there.
Absolutely.
A good deal. I know I've heard, I think it was the state ed secretary, Dr. Graves, saying that that's one of the theories behind declining standardized test scores is the rise of cell phones. So maybe, hopefully, we'll see some improved test scores down the road.
Yeah, I think so many things. And when it comes to just being able to really all of the programs that our students are on, our kids are on their phone, they are so programmed. The devices have apps that are programmed to just stimulate kids' attention and whatnot. And so for them to then just be able to redirect in a different type of way, in a different sort of like calmer, peaceful studying type way, is significant change from what they are drawn to with their cell phone. And so we know there's a lot of pieces there with attention, but so we hope so. We just also hope that some of those life skills come, communication. We've had parents even so much as say, my kid now knows how to be without their cell phone at night because they're without it for these chunks of time during the day. And that is just a shift in thinking. And so we just hope to see a lot of those positive pieces come out of it. We've always told the kids, this didn't happen because we were mad at you. We believe in you, and we don't want to limit your potential by allowing that to have more control over what you're doing during the day than your brain is allowing, yourself to have. And so we're just really happy that they have supported it as good as they have.
That sounds like it's going really well. Was there anything else you wanted to mention this week?
I don't think so.
We have a couple events coming up. I think this Thursday there's a choir concert. Next Monday, orchestra concert, debate tournament coming up. Oh, this Saturday is the HOSA Science Saturday at the high school.
Yes.
Busy time of the year. We want to wish everyone the very best of luck as we round out the first semester.
Absolutely. It is busy. It is such a busy time of year, and the concert season and the fact that we have Science Saturday in the middle of all that just really makes me happy. That's one of the areas we're also just trying to make sure is embedded throughout all of our schools, and this is a really fun one for our older kids, and so I have to stop in and see it too.
That is a neat one. I'm glad they started doing that.
Yeah.
So we look forward to that continuing as well. All right. Thank you very much. You've been listening to Dr. Summer Schultz, Superintendent of Schools here in Brookings on Brookings Radio.